Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off our discussion right away, Dr. Al-Halim, now this is the 8th ministerial meeting of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum. This was attended by representatives of 21 states, including the Emir of Kuwait, Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, also the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul-Ghait, and Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri. First of all, can you shed light on the importance and the significance of such a forum?
Right. As its own title might indicate right from the early beginning, it's a sort of cooperation forum. It does underline the fact that there is a great deal of cooperation and coordination between both sides, that is the Arab side on one hand and the Chinese on the other, since quite a long period of time. And that sort of cooperation is not by no means recent in its own existence. Actually, it may go back actually for about 2,000 years ago. You know, the cultural details, the spiritual aspects, and the mutual identifications between two nations, actually, maybe one of the things, actually, that would bring them together at one communion and bringing them, actually, at one final target at the end of the day. As it stands, the sort of the forum seems to be quite very much exceptional, apart from the cultural heritage and the historical details, actually, that would go back to, you know, I mean, as I've just said, about 2,000 years ago. We have got more than one thing in common, actually. The Arab people, on the other hand, are very much, you know, sharing a large number of characteristic details, such as extreme sense of politeness, the respectability, and the sense of dignity, and the mutual identification with the other people, and the awareness of the sense of patriotism, actually. The fact that China, as a nation, actually, is very much aware of its own chauvinistic attitude towards fighting for quite a long period of years. Korea, United States of America, even at the very beginning, before getting its own emancipation during the early 50s, it did not use to propagate those good ties, actually, with Israel. The fact that, despite the fact that you can really say that Israel as a state was the first country, actually, to publicize and to endorse the emancipation of China, you know, as a nation, but the fact that they had been quite passing through a long period of turmoil and disputes for quite a long period of time. But apart from this and that, we can really, you know, anticipate a great deal of success for that particular sort of forum. And so far as, you know, as I've just said, we have got more than one thing in common. Part of the agenda that will be discussed and that will be examined, actually, during the sort of the previous 2 days by Mr. Sameh Shukri, Foreign Minister, is, you know, the sort of you know, issues on regional as much as an international arena, things of mutual interest, of mutual concern, the Palestinian cause, the Syrian territorial, you know, I mean, problematic issue that, you know, I mean, used to be quite very much nightmarish aspect for both sides for quite a long period of time. You know, China as a nation is very much befriending the Arab nation since quite a long period of time. And if you really trace the sort of the historic friendliness, so to speak, actually it did start, actually, you know, at 2004 when the Chinese president was visiting the Arab League in Cairo during the previous foreign minister period of foreign minister, Mr. Amr Musa, actually, as a foreign minister. But before, you know, this and that, you can really anticipate signs of mutual interest and concern during the early 50s. When, you know, I mean, the tripartite aggression actually was to be devastating Egypt in 1965. You know, I mean, the first nation actually was to be China, addressing its rejection, that sort of triple aggression or triple attack by France, by Israel, as much as by Britain in the meantime. Immediately after that, when Egypt was to be endorsed, actually, or let me say, forced to get into a sort of the setback of 1967. Again, you can really find that China is always endorsing the cause of the Egyptian military armed forces, actually, and fortifying Egypt on a large scale to the extent that you can really anticipate a great deal of signs of mutual identification and fortification on the part of the Chinese front during the sort of the battle of the 6th of October in 1973, and very recently till the 25th of January revolution and endorsement of that sort of revolution was the amendment and the correction of the 3rd of June. China is always there, not only being, as one of the iconic countries within the world, not only being the second largest power, economic, strategic, military, but also as, occupying what you might call a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. And this is a great asset for our own manipulation of our own problematic situations, particularly the Palestinian cause. So in general, actually, you can really anticipate that that sort of forum would acquire an added significance, very much exceptional at this particular time, particularly when, the sort of the mutual identification between the Arab nation on the one hand and the Chinese people on the other would seem to be quite adding an added significance, actually.
Yes. Well, Dr. Abdul-Halim, from this forum, it seems that there is a lot of economic cooperation, but as you've mentioned, there is also a political dimension between China and the Arab states. Now, we will get to the economic cooperation and the financial assistance in a bit, but talk to me about the political dimension between China and the Arab states. Can China now have some sort of political or diplomatic influence regarding certain crises, regional crises, such as the one you've mentioned, the Palestinian issue, maybe the situation in Syria, Iraq? What is the nature or the dynamics of the Chinese political influence on the region with the Arab states?
The fact that the impact is very much prodigious, so very much great, and endorsement of the Chinese part is quite apparent, as I've just said right from the early start. From political point of view, you can really anticipate a great deal of mutual endorsement and mutual identification between both sides. China as a nation is very much always at turmoil with the United States of America for quite a long period of time, not on good terms with Korea. In the meantime, actually, the sort of the peaceful initiation of settlement and of normalization with Israel was very much recent, just for political reasons and for strategic causes, actually, so to speak. And as such, you can really anticipate that within the world of politics, a nation may be very much, normalizing a certain sense of a strategic tie with the previous enemy. So much so that you can really find that yesterday's enemy may be today's friend and tomorrow's best ally. And as such, this is the case holds good, and this is what really happens with China. China was not holding very good ties actually with Israel, despite the fact that, as I just mentioned, that Israel was the first nation to accept and endorse the existence of China as a nation. That was back at the early 50s. And America, a couple of days ago, Donald Trump actually was trying to impose sanctions on China, as much as maximizing the rates of the value-added taxes actually on the items and on the nation-done items, so to speak, and those commodities actually coming from China, just by way of minimizing its own prodigious states. And as such, China is trying to counterattack the same American side by maximizing the sort of the values and the taxes actually on American commodities, to the extent that, political analysts are very much frowning on that sort of very much crucial situation, and so far as it would lead to the maximization of the prices on almost all commodities and the maximization of prices of the international markets of the oil, and as such the only loser will be the whole world at large. And as such, a large number of political observers are very much warning the American administration of not getting into such a sort of turmoil, such sort of what you might call an act of life of disputes actually with the Chinese side, because the only loser will be the whole world at large. That's why, on one hand, China is very much quite aware of its own stability, of its own power, of its own prodigious sense of existence within the map of the road, being, as I've just said, a permanent, member of, of the fifth large countries, the second largest economic power, And for political reasons, actually, you can really find that a couple of days, Mr. Sameh Shukri is quite aware of the previous history between China and between Israel. That's why he was very much sagacious and very much resourceful enough as to tackle the sort of the two-state solution, insisting every now and again in his own ministerial meeting, as much as with his own previous meeting with the Vice President of China, on how important that sort of cause for all the Arab world is, in much the same way that, settling and pacifying the sort of the Libyan cause as much as the Syrian territories. So, on a strategic level, China is very much important as the second largest powerful tectonic existence within the world, as very much aiming as much as dreaming actually of playing a sort of a pivotal role of getting into the heart of Africa. We wouldn't have to forget that since quite a long period of time, about 30 years ago, the Chinese presidents are thinking of trying to establish and of identifying themselves within the map of the road, within the Asian world as much as within the African world. And I think the only way to get into the heart of the African continent is through Egypt. That's why it is highly supposed that Egypt will be playing such a pivotal role in, pacifying the turmoil and the sort of the problematic issues on a large scale, and we can really get use of the sort of the endemic history that was quite be propagated for a long period of time between Chinese side on the hand and American administration as much as the Israeli state, so to speak, if it is to be actually, I would say.
Well, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, has actually earmarked $23 billion in terms of financial assistance and humanitarian aid to Arab countries in general, and also earmarked $91 million to countries such as Yemen, Syria, Lebanon and Jordan. Do you think with this strong assistance to the Arab countries, do you think that it can actually put China in some sort of a conflict, whether directly or indirectly, with countries such as Israel, for instance, as you've mentioned, maybe other countries such as Iran, maybe other European countries that are involved within the region and might not be so, might be frowning upon such a strong assistance from China?
I wouldn't say so. The fact that at one time America was warning Israel for quite a long period of time of not mutually identifying itself strategically or even providing China with weaponries that are to be made in USA. But the fact that Israel was insisting every now and again, and America would seem to be quite, giving the impression that it is to be quite unaware of what is happening just by way of stabilizing and fortifying the Jewish state within the Middle East, actually, for being, playing the role of a nation of vast technological weaponries. But when America at one time would reach to the fact that the whole situation is very much aggravated and that Chinese power is very much maximized to a greater extent, it would endorse Israel actually to stop providing actually China with that sort of highly technological weaponries and weapons, I would say. And as such, you can really anticipate that within the world of politics and exchanging, weaponries, the whole case is totally different, actually. I mean that the strategic ties and military interferences, as much as the mutual identification between one country and another from political point of view, strategic reasons, actually, might not be, very much life-threatening, actually, for the United States of America. It knows that it can really get into the whole heart of it in a certain time, within a certain place, and the suitable chance, actually, to try to make sanctions, to try to make obstacles and deterrents, as much as to try to impede the sort of the vast technological aspects. But we can really understand right from the early start that the most iconic impact, actually, that is to be proactive would come, and the sort of the threatening voice would come from the Chinese part. And America is quite aware of that sort of thing. And no matter how, the sort of the cooperation, actually, that would, sorry about that, occur within a Chinese side on the one hand and the Arab nation on the other, is to be represented by the two-day summit and today's forum. You wouldn't say that it would, give sign of reaction or frowning on the part of the American administration, because it knows that these are transactions. And all these are sorts of weights that are to be there for quite a limited period of time for certain specific purposes, actually. Not actually with the view of exceeding the sort of the danger that might be practiced by fortifying one of those Arab nations. I think that America is quite aware of that sort of cooperation, much the same way that the Israeli side is quite, tending to pretend actually that it's to be there for political reasons, for reasons of peace, for stability and for economic reasons. But behind these and that, you can really find that there is a major schematic plan, which is getting into the heart of Africa, trying to play a sort of a role that had never ever been entitled to it before, in much the same way that within the world of politics outside, things would seem to be of mutual concern, and what would seem to be profitable at the end of the day is targeting one's own interests, one's own schematic concerns, actually, so to speak.
Well, Dr. Al-Halim, you've mentioned many times how important for China it is to actually try and penetrate the African continent and really try and establish these strong political and especially economic ties. And one of the main initiatives has been the Belt and Road Initiative that has been under discussion, the Silk Road, under discussion for a few years now. How far are we in actually finalizing and achieving and seeing this Belt Road Initiative being a reality?
The Belt Road Initiative is towards the east. In much the same way that we are trying actually to make something from the western, that is the belts of the road, actually, or the seat of the road. These two schematic projects are in the interests of fortifying and maximizing the sort of the ties that had already been there right from the early start, to the extent that you can really find that the sort of the cooperation now by yesterday's forum is in many ways maximized in such a way as to be a sort of a strategic partnership, not only mere cooperation. That's why I can really anticipate signs of mutual identification as much as signs of great deal of success on the part of the Chinese side to get into, the heart of the Arab world. And in the meantime, it's to be modeled as much as to be very much schematically programmed and the interests of both sides. It is as indeed the case with the military maneuvers, actually, when, an American armed forces would come to an Egyptian territory, actually, to make a sort of a maneuver. Actually, both sides would get benefits and interests in the interests of all concerned. That's why I think that that sort of strategic partnership, or let me say, that sort of very much, bringing together the economic projects between both sides would seem to be at the end of the day in the interest, of course, of the Arab world in the first rate, and I think in the second rate in the Chinese. But, to a greater extent, we can really, anticipate that the Chinese side is making such a prodigious achievement within the Egyptian territories. The fact that the expansion of the Suez Canal or the Suez Canal corridor, as much as the phosphate program, as being expanded, and the coal, energetic mines that are to be, securitized and privatized actually for quite a period of time, in which you can really use and utilize them, as much as a large number of programs in Alexandria and the electric train that would connect, Salam with, Bilbais and Sharqiya, passing through, the tents of Ramadan city. All these vast, schematic, successive projects, actually, would go side by side with the presidential authorities, actually, intentions of maximizing the safety and security as much as the ways and the means through the aid of which you would expand, actually, the route, just by way of giving a very suitable chance for commodities actually to be merchandised on a large scale, and the transactions not only between that Chinese side on one hand and the Arab nation on the other.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're now also joined over the phone by Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Saleh, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Ambassador, first of all, the Foreign Minister and the Secretary General of the Arab League are actually participating in this 8th Ministerial Forum, the Chinese Arab Cooperation Forum. What is the significance for the Arab states of this forum?
Well, China is coming late to the region. It is trying as much as possible to be able to have some role here. And the program which China started eight years ago is really a modest program. And still, I think they have to work a little bit harder in order to be able to have some role to play both on the political level and on the economic level. I witnessed the Chinese efforts both in Africa and in the Arab world, and I thought they can do better. And what they are offering at this particular point in this conference is $20 billion along 5 years, which is not really a major contribution, but it is a beginning to be able to build a partnership. So in this case, I think we are moving in the right direction, and I think this meeting is significant in terms of just telling that the road is still in front of us.
Ambassador Saleh, you said that still more needs to be done by this forum. This is the 8th forum. It was founded in 2004. What has been achieved so far since 2004 as a result of this forum?
Well, I don't really know exactly what they have achieved in these 14 years or so, or 13 years. But what I noticed is that, they are a latecomer, and they are acting as fast as they can. However, they are very cautious. They are trying to put together things which are not really very ambitious. And in a sense, it depends also on the other side, on the Arab side, how they can meet their initiatives and how they can put their own ideas. China is focused on this idea of the Belt, the Silk Road and the Belt and so on, which is a good idea. It's a historical process which they are trying to bring back. But it has also to be reconsidered from the Arab side how we can build our own road, which basically the Arab world was the main actor in trying to connect China to Europe in the Middle Ages. So it's a both-way, two-way type of cooperation. And I think, there is a need from the Arab side, particularly the Arab League, since the Arab League Secretary General is there, to really put together a task force to see how can you build a real partnership with China.
Do you feel that China might be playing a strong political role in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the future?
No, I don't think so. I think they are very cautious. They are moving step by step. They are trying to build relations. They have in the past have been in a good position to announce their support for the Palestinian cause, which I think was great. It's I think still pursuing that, but to be able to actively engage in the negotiation or in really building a peace process or really helping it, I think that would be limited.
Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, also President Sisi is looking to boost and deepen the cooperation with China in a September visit. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has said that he is looking forward to a visit to Beijing next September to deepen the mutual beneficial cooperation between Egypt and China. The president will attend the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation, the FOCAC summit in China. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is currently in Beijing to participate in the 8th ministerial meeting of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum, held talks with China's Vice President Wang Qishan. During the meeting with Wang, Shoukry hailed the deeply rooted Egyptian-Chinese ties which were elevated to comprehensive strategic partnership. He cited 4 visits by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to China at an invitation from the Chinese president. The top diplomat highlighted the pivotal role played by Chinese companies in bolstering Egypt's development efforts, especially implementing mammoth national projects. He noted that Egypt works on removing any obstacles facing Chinese investments, voicing hope to boost Egyptian exports to China as well as Chinese tourism in Egypt. For his part, Wang congratulated the Sisi for winning a new presidential term, noting that Egypt managed to realize stability. He underlined China's keenness on buttressing Egypt's efforts to achieve development, referring to the historical ties binding the two states. According to Wang, the presidents of the two countries are expected to hold meetings and several events due to be held in the upcoming period. The talks also tackle bilateral cooperation in countering terrorism, as well as the latest developments in negotiations on the Ethiopian dam.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Abdul-Halim, we're going to talk more about Egypt's role in this forum and the Chinese-Egyptian relations in specific. But before that, do you feel that this meeting, this 8th Ministerial Forum, do you feel that it's now even a little bit more important for China than the previous ones in light of all the tension between China and the US, both countries slamming tariffs on each other's products back and forth? China needs to have some sort of a base or another market, a big market, just in case things turn even more sour between the US and China.
Yeah, it seems to be quite looming large. I think that things are getting from worse to the worst, I would say. But before getting into the sort of the heart of the matter, actually, let me analyze the sort of the forum, actually, when it was to be inaugurated in 2004. You know, I mean, they stipulated 3 stages, which is supposed to be the first, that is the ministerial stage or the ministerial meeting. It is supposed to be actually to be held for quite perhaps a couple of years, either in Peking or in the residence of the Arab League, that is Cairo, so to speak. And this is what actually had been, you know, I mean, stipulated. And the second stage, which is supposed to be nominating or allocating certain VIPs, distinctive charismatic figures, actually, to be quite able, actually, to demonstrate, to select and reject, to quite act and react, to quite able to take decisions or decision-taking, actually, which is supposed to be the second stage. And the third stage, which is supposed to be, you know, the most important, which is, you know, I mean, the communicating officers or the charismatic figures that are quite able to take decisions, actually, not only for the Arab nation, but actually for other countries. And this is what is to be actually inaugurated right from the early start. We can really find that China is keeping an eye, very much scrutinizing the sort of the projects and very much strategic role that had been played, actually, by our own political, you know, I mean, authority and diplomacy, soft diplomacy, so to speak, for quite the previous 4 years. That's why we can really follow during the first term of His Own Excellency Mr. Sisi. He did visit China for quite 4 times, individually for 4 years. I think that each single individual year of his own presidency, actually, is to be accompanied with a sort of straightforward and direct visit to Peking. And this should be underlined, I think. In much same way that in 2016, the president of China actually did visit Egypt and was very much commending and praising the sort of the democratic steps that had been interpreted in many other terms as a sort of coup d'etat. We would have to accept and endorse the fact that China is quite endorsing the Egyptian case as much as the Palestinian cause. And I'm going to interpret it in the due course of time. First, let me keep our shed a little light, actually, on the sort of the visit of the Chinese president on Egypt, to Egypt, so to speak. He was quite, you know, I mean, discussing every now and again with Mr. Sisi, you know, I mean, that on no account, actually, should Egypt detract from the wars or withdraw from the sort of the eminent success that it did achieve, actually, in the 25th of January 2011 as much as the 6th of June. This is at one stage. At another, actually, he was, you know, I mean, in the international community, fortifying as much as posting the sort of the real interpretation of the sort of the revolution of the 3rd of June as a real, you know, revolution, not a coup d'etat. And to a greater extent, immediately after 4 or 5 months, actually, about 80 countries that started to withdraw from calling the 3rd of June as a sort of coup d'etat. And this is one of the fundamental issues, actually. They would have to be quite aware of how important the sort of the mutual identification between the two countries are, in much the same way that how China is keeping an eye on Egypt, as I've just said, as a strategic and very much pivotal role that is to be brought not only within bringing together the mutual tussles and pacifying the sort of the atmosphere of alienation and isolation that might be there within, the Palestinian tussle or the Palestinian-Israeli side, but actually between two other adjacent Arab countries, actually. And much the same that the American administration is quite aware of that sort of role that is to be practiced by the Egyptian presidency. And as such, you can really, understand how important the sort of that exceptional forum may be, and how the sort of the amount of money that is to be, donated, so to speak, actually, for those pivotal projects, actually, just by way of trying to solve the economic incompatibility, actually, of the Egyptian society. That is from one point of view. From another, actually, in the meantime, stabilizing the democratic opinionations, actually, of almost all the nation, just by way of pushing Egyptian, presidency a bit forward towards one way of success, actually, so to speak. So, I myself can really, from vast amount of experience and speed, that China is quite keeping an eye on the Egyptian side, not only as just a way through the aid of which actually it would get into achieving and the consummation of the previous dream of getting, as I've just said, into the heart of Africa, but in the meantime of trying actually to pacify, the turmoil and the sort of the troubles and the Middle East as stemming from other adjacent countries, but the point of reconciliation will be stemming out from Egypt itself. That's why between Cairo and between Peking there is a sort of mutual identification, a charismatic impact, and a sort of harmony, so to speak, or a harmonious, actually, song that is to be sung even now and again with each single individual forum that is to be held. And this is supposed to be, as I've just said, the 8th one. The 8th in number, but very much achieving a great deal of success. We can really, owe a great deal of tribute, and we are very much indebted, actually, for the Chinese interference within the expansion of the Suez Canal, was providing us with modern means of technology, was highly technological instruments, as much as the expertise of Chinese, science that are very much highly known here, there, and everywhere, of how scientifically equipped with modern means of technology they maybe really are, as much as of how, kind, so to speak, that they would seem to be actually to our own side, I would say.
Well, Dr. Al-Halim, you've mentioned, and it is very clear, the strong relationship between Egypt and China, between both governments, between the presidents, and it seems that there is a lot of cooperation between both countries on trade level, developmental level, cultural level, political, militarily. So how different is it, Egypt's relationship between Egypt and China directly, and its participation within this ministerial forum, this cooperation between all Arab states and China? How is the dynamics of the relationship changing from the personal one-on-one relationship to this relationship and this participation within the whole ministerial forum?
The sort of the ministerial forum as it stands seems to be quite very much exceptional, particularly when Prince of Kuwait actually, would endorse today that, were very much tight and very much near, actually, to this Chinese orbit, so to speak. He did say it in somehow or another, expressing how, fortifying and how posting their own existence, actually, within our own plan of the roads, or map of the road, so to speak, would be. And the presidential authority is quite, changing, very much transforming the sort of the cooperation into an integration with the view of, or in the interests of both sides. But in the meantime, we have got one straightforward and one direct, so to speak, schematic role that is to be played by the presidency The fact that Mr. Sameh Shukri yesterday did say that on our account we would have to change our own plan of the boycotting attitude or the for quoted countries, that is Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, as much as Egypt. Despite the fact that the sort of the forum is not very much concerned to discuss on a large scale all these international issues or all these very much regional troubling facts within the Gulf area. But Mr. Sameh Shukri is quite sending a straightforward message, not only for China, but also for its own allies, as much as for the American administration and to the world at large, of how straightforward, how sticking our own role maybe towards actually, the certain demands that had been, asked or ordered by the four boycott countries or the four-quoted countries, and how our own strategy will be on our account changeable actually. We've got a certain schematic rule, one man fixed the map of the road, and in the meantime the same thing will hold good with China as much as with any other sort of ally, no matter what sort of ally, maybe no matter what sort of superpower, maybe at large actually.
Yes. Well, Dr. Al-Halim, you've also mentioned the Chinese investments and its role in the expansion of the Suez Canal, actually having a trade zone there. Also, a Chinese enterprise opened China's first overseas fiberglass production, creating over 2,000 local jobs and making Egypt the largest fiberglass producer in Africa. What is the potential of this Chinese efforts and developments within this area?
Very great, actually. They would say a word and they would mean it. They're quite able, actually, to assume and to control the sort of the schematic progress that they would aim at. If they say something, they would have to interpret it in details into actions, so to speak. That's why those people are quite, aware of how planning is supposed to be very much important for all their own programs. And in the meantime, the sort of the planning will add to another great deal of performance. And that's what they are really doing, actually, in our own territorial lands. Coupled with the planning and the performance, the sort of the progress that you are waiting for, actually, side by side with all these Chinese highly technological expertise. And in the meantime, I think that by providing us with all these technological aspects as much as personnel and manpower, they may be in somehow or another solving one of our own problematic issues, which is the market unemployment actually. I think that they would offer suitable chances for youngsters actually to be able actually to fill the void of the emptiness of their own life, instead of loitering or instead of wasting their own time actually doing nothing actually. They would seem to be in somehow or another side by side with the presidential authority, aiming to finding another alternative for them, that is to be involved within one of the jobs that are very much prodigious actually on a large scale. So on a communal level, on a social level, on a military level actually, as much as strategic, consultative and diplomatic levels actually, the sort of the forum is very much exceptional, very much taken, very highly technological, successive, as much as massive steps towards solving not only problematic issues of regional, importance, but of international arena in the meantime. I think also that Mr. Sameh Shukri is quite concerned of tackling actually the Syrian problematic issue as much as the Libyan tussle actually, insisting every now and again on the solidarity of all these Arab lands and of the sense of mutual identification with all those Arab people being very much part and parcel of the Arab heart of the Arabs, so the heart of their own agenda. And on top of them is the Palestinian cause that is very much turmoil, particularly after the declaration of Mr. Donald Trump about moving, the embassy from Tel Aviv actually to Jerusalem. And I think also yesterday Mr. Sameh Shukri insisted on the existence of the Palestinian state headed by Eastern Jerusalem, the self-same actually sort of what you might call axiomatic, insistence on and upon, no matter how false these declarations on the part of the American administration. Maybe we still have got our own plan of the road and map of the road. We have got our own fixed agenda. We have got our own fixed personality and our own schematic program that is to be initiated, no matter how all these allies may be very much at one time unifying with each other just by way of altering and changing the suit of the map.
Yes. Well, Dr. Abdul Halim, you've mentioned that China really needs to have this sort of influence within Africa and within the Arab region as well. And to be able to do that, you need to have strong relations with the main player in the continent, which is Egypt. Yeah. Now, Egypt and China, they will both benefit economically from each other. But if China has a strong role and a strong influence within this region and within the continent, what would it use it for? How good would a political influence be for China within this region and this continent?
Safeguarding its own interests, as much as achieving their own dreams, in much the same way that they are trying actually to be provided with a sort of a role that they had been usurped out of for quite a long period of time, Korea, as much as Israel. Under the auspices of the American administration since the early 50s, they are denying every now and again China actually to interfere within that sort of heart of the world, in much the same way that they are quite aware that once the Chinese authorities would get into the heart of Africa, actually, this is another negative step towards consummating one previous step towards actually practicing a sort of domination and supervision as much as dominion over that very much strategic part of the world. That's why for quite a long period of time, Israel is, apart from or despite its own strategic partnership as much as mutual identification with China, despite the fact that they are, exchanging commodities with each other and normalizing the sort of relations. No matter how America would seem to be quite frowning every now and again. But I would really say that the sort of the role that is to be integrated by China nowadays is very much a threatening voice, actually, not only for the American administration, for Israeli people in the meantime. And much the same way that it is one way or another, actually, of expanding the sort of the role that is to be practiced by their own military parades, actually, within that part of the world. In addition to the fact that, as I just said, assuming a sort of a permanent seat, actually, in the UN Security Council is another threatening target, actually. And in the meantime, it would do and have its own agenda, actually, of what it's thinking of, actually, of achieving within that heart of the world.
Well, President Donald Trump actually mentioned quite recently that he was skeptical regarding China's role or China's attitude towards the denuclearization process that would be taking place within the Korean Peninsula, obviously after the meeting of the North Korean leader with President Trump in Singapore. How do you feel this will affect the Chinese dynamics within the political spectrum internationally?
I wouldn't think that in any conceivable respect the agenda of China may be changed somehow or another. The fact that Israel is quite aware of how, threatening its own existence maybe, in much the same way that the United States quite aware of the previous impact and effect of China within the world. And as such, I think that on our account, they would escape the sort of the role that is to be played. Either they would accept it willingly or unwillingly, actually. Either, for the interests of the sort of the district or the sort of the area or their own aspirations. All I can really say that Donald Trump is quite aware, in much the same way that Israel would seem to be quite aware also of the sort of the advancement of China. not only from a strategic point, but also actually on a commercial side, because I mean a large number of commodities and of investments and of merchandise items actually are to be, displayed here, there, and everywhere, and they are quite intelligent and resourceful enough as to know what is what and who is who and which is which. The fact that they are itemizing and fabricating a large number of items actually with a great deal of specifications and ingredients and intentions, so to speak, about what sort of area that they are directing that sort of item to, with different layers of perfections, with different specifications. For the super advanced world, they are quite aware of sophisticating their own items, much the same way that within the third world countries, that they are quite aware that the lack of economic stability may be a pivotal part, and as such they would minimize and degrade the ingredients and the infrastructure of the items that they are fabricating. So they are very much cunning and very much resourceful. They are doing what to do and what sort of thing that they will have to do in a certain time in a certain place.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully the 8th ministerial cooperation and forum between China and the Arab states proves very beneficial for both sides, for all the Arab states and China as well, and hopefully the deepening of relationships between Egypt and China will go even further than it already is right now. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. محمد الحليم, the political analyst. Dr. الحليم, always a pleasure having you with us. Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Al International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.
Exclusive.